and welcome to another edition of Proselytize or Apostatize. I'm your host, David Russell, and I don't have a co-host today. What's going on, you might ask? But no, we have an exciting show for you right now. So before we get into that, though, I do want to announce the contest. So as you know, last week I announced that we are going to have a contest on who can make the best logo for PORA, because we're looking for a new logo, and we might in the future look for a new name, because proselytize or apostatize is a mouthful. Even NT Wright said that on Ask NT Wright Everything. But yeah, so tonight's a special night because, as you know, David Paulman is actually leaving us. And you got a taste of it in the intro for May, and you got a little taste of it last week, as you saw Caleb Jackson hosting a debate between me and Cassiano Montana. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name. Caleb had to pronounce it, which I was thankful for. But yeah, so yeah, that's what's happening there. So who is Caleb? Caleb is a guy that decided to come on the show to debate our good friend, the Honest Atheist. And they debated whether Christianity was true, and ever since then, Caleb has been an integral part of the show. Caleb has put together debates for us. He has worked behind the scenes in several different areas. There's actually two guys that really stuck out to me when David was like, hey, I got to leave because I'm moving. As you know, David is moving, so that's why he has to leave the podcast. So I was like, dude, Caleb, and he was like one of the first that came to my mind. And I was like, dude, this guy's helped us out so much. He has, put together debates, and, that kind of saves our butts sometimes, because sometimes, we do get these periods where we're like, man, what type of content do I put out? What do I do? So yeah, Caleb's been an integral part of that. So before I bring him on, I want you guys to get ready to either A, grill him, B, come on and just talk to him, because we are going to ask Caleb a lot of questions tonight, myself included, hopefully, if I can remember some of them, because I am winging it, guys. This is kind of like an episode of like Coffee Cup Apologetics or Brew and Talk, or whatever it is. You have a beer and you talk about theology and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what. But without further ado, I cooked this up. So this is going to be the new face of PORA. So without further ado, here we go. Awesome. Welcome, Caleb, man. Congratulations, brother. You are now officially a co-host of PORA. How does it feel, man?
It feels great. I mean, I feel like I've kind of already been a signatory co-host for the past couple of months, just because I've been helping out so much behind the scenes, as you pointed out in the intro.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and we're grateful for that, man. And it's there's nothing better to get somebody that, like, instead of, David was like, hey, let's look for a new co-host. And I was like, look for one. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, okay, man, find somebody if you have to. And I was just going to leave it all on him. But at the end of the day, I sent him a text because, he hadn't been responded to me. And we had plenty of time to, like, think about it and plan it out and stuff like that. I knew since, like, January this was going to happen. But, yeah, I was like, dude, Caleb, I just seen him. I said, we got to ask Caleb before we ask anybody. I would feel wrong if I didn't ask Caleb first, because this guy has been in it, man. And he's been trying to promote this brand and this ministry for a long time. Hey, look, somebody's already saying, hey, look at that, Jackson. But yeah, so and this one's actually a little disappointed. As you know, he was a former co-host as well. His name was Titus. But we don't listen to Mennonites here because they like to stay secluded in their own little communities. And Daniel Lowery says, how's it going, heretics? Hey, guys, look, I'm going to send the link. You guys are more than welcome to come on. Caleb, what I did here was I told them that they can grill you if they want, or me, and they can ask us questions or anything, so but the first thing I want to do is welcome you and let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and who you are, what church you go to, your personal email, your blood type, all that type of stuff, man. Go ahead.
All right, I'll do blood type first. I'm A positive, which is nice. I mean, Jesus's blood type was AB positive, but that's a letter down. Few people will get that joke, but it's okay. So yeah, my name is Caleb Jackson, as we've established. CJ is just what I put there for short. I actually am going to graduate Indiana University on Monday, so I'm done with school. I'm walking with degrees in political science and communications, so that's nice. And hopefully in the upcoming winter, I will be able to do a paid internship with Indiana State House, where I'll work with senators and congressmen and all that fun stuff. But in my free time, as a hobby, I do theology and apologetics, which I just kind of got into about 2.5 years ago or so. And since then, I've written 2 books as of now. The first one's Undead, which is on the resurrection, and actually has a different cover now, but that's okay. And my latest one is called Searching for a Solution to Suffering, which, can't get in the camera, is on the problem of evil and theodicy, which is a topic that was just talked about on the show. Both of those are on Amazon. And I'm currently working on a third one, which is by far my longest one that I've done so far. I'm already at about 400 pages, and I'm probably like 2/3 of the way done. So this could be a 600-page book or so by the time it's done. And that one is on a contemporary miracles and visions of Jesus and supernatural phenomenon, let's say, and tying that back to the resurrection. So I'm very excited for that. That will probably be out maybe this winter or next spring. It depends on how long it's going to take. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on in my life right now. And I'm just glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to all these people who are in the chat, a lot of which I talk to a lot, and we pretty much have already grilled each other on various things. So I'm sure that'll be fun.
Yeah, it will be. But Caleb, somebody just asked, that you don't attend church. Is this true? I'm really kind of scared here. Who am I bringing on here to host with me here? And Titus, he's a little worried too. He says we're going down the slipper slopes here. Now we've got a universalist, although you're not a committed universalist from what I've gathered. So you still hope for you.
I'm a tentative universalist. We can say that. So the movie theater comment is a reference to. So I'm non-denominational, right? I go to a non-denominational church, sometimes a Baptist church, but the joke is that it kind of looks like a concert, these big screens and stuff like that. And we were comparing churches, and everyone else went to the, Lutheran. They're very, very traditional looking stained glass with an altar kind of churches. And so it was just kind of mocking that whole contemporary niche look to it, which is kind of funny. But I think that's where that sentiment is coming from. But
so guys, if you like the show and you want to continue to support the show or do whatever you want to do, hit the subscribe button. That's all you have to do. Me and Caleb are trying to take this to another level, as you saw in the little video that was made. So yeah, man, come on here, grill Caleb. Also for the contest, guys, I do want to put out my email. All you have to do is send me a email to this email address with the logo attached, and you will get a prize. I am going to send you something. So once that is done, I will ask for your address, and you can share it with me because it will be in my private email, so you don't have to worry about it being live on here. And I will send you something. So let us know. And if you want to take part in this artistic endeavor, send me an email. But yeah, so Caleb, what made you want to join the show?
Well, I think the very first time I joined the show in the debate with James, the honest atheist, was David Paulman had reached out to me. And I had talked to Paulman probably about a month or two beforehand about we were in the same theology group, I think, on Facebook. I don't remember the first time I interacted with him, but I was like, oh yeah, he seems like a smart guy. He's very opinionated, very outspoken about it. And so am I. So like, what a great combination. So he was like, hey, do you want to come on our show? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I always wanted to do YouTube. Never had the time. I was more of a writer than a video person, so I never really edited my own stuff. But podcasts are a great idea, and I like talking, so it's I can talk for a while. So I think that's a good environment to do that. But it kind of took off since.
Yeah, and you are a political science guy, so you probably already disagree a lot with Titus. So we're going to bring him on here and let him say hi. What's up, Titus?
Hey guys, what's going on?
Nothing much. As you can see, we got our new co-host here, Paul, but he's actually in a debate. He wanted to come on, but I'm leaving it open. I'm leaving this podcast running for a little bit. We're going to talk about theology and be geeks. So I'm calling ourselves the Theo Geeks tonight. So we're going to talk about anything y'all want to. Also, you can grill Caleb if you'd like. So Titus, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. What's up with the logo change? That's sacred, man. I made that logo.
Yep, and you know what? It's time for a change. One of the biggest things for YouTube is people like to see change. They like to see new content. They like to see new things. So I thought I'd start with the logo and then move on to the name. What do you think?
I keep thinking it is true. You need to change that name. It is a really odd name.
Yeah, and it's long. It's too much for people to type. So, Caleb, I'm a little worried about this comment here. It says, Caleb attends an ugly fake church building. It's so bad. Caleb, the radically skeptic lib. And then this one, he also went to the Creation Museum and loved it. Caleb,
wow.
Explain yourself, sir.
All of these commenters who I know want to stick behind their keyboards instead of doing this face to face like a man, but that's okay.
Here's the link for face to face, gentlemen, in the super chat.
So I already explained the church thing with the building. The comment about being skeptical. So there's a lot of backstory to that, but in the group that I'm in, we have a lot of very conservative. McGroovian kind of resurrection people, and I take a little bit more of a moderate stance, and they don't like that I'm not an echo chamber. Let's say I don't even disagree with their conclusions. I try to play devil's advocate and be as fair as I can to the other side, and they just want to sometimes wring my neck and be like, why don't you just say this and this? Why do you have to be so critical? But I don't know. I think that's a virtue, but I kind of find it funny how it annoys them. It's almost a joke at this point of me disagreeing just for the sake of disagreeing. So.
Right on. So you guys just got called out that are in the chat to come on. Titus, I'm gonna let you take it away, man. You want to grill this guy?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So all I know about you is that you're a universalist or a hopeful universalist, because we had that debate/discussion a couple months ago.
Anyone who hasn't seen the video, by the way, go check it out because that's on the channel as well.
And apparently you're into high church. Is that what I was hearing earlier in this show?
High church. Hey, Daniel's here. No, it was So to give context, it was a non-denominational church that they were calling a movie theater, including the one who's right here, by the way, because the way it looks is like with the screens and stuff. Whereas most of them had very traditional Lutheran or stained glass churches where it's all that, which is very beautiful architecturally speaking. But I won't use the word boring, but we'll have whatever implications you want. I actually don't even know which church David Russell goes to, so maybe that's fair as well if we're gonna.
I go to an Amish church because I took after Titus after he left the show.
Yeah. I feel like many nights
I became a pacifist too.
Amish people, but
I'm curious about your political science studies. So like, what's motivating you to get into politics?
It's kind of funny. So I went into college 2017. Right after the 2016 election, which turned most people off to politics. But I thought that was just a very exciting time because it was being more like, I think, talked about than any other election and stuff like that. So that just got me really interested in politics. And I've had my views change throughout college to certain degrees, some to certain degrees, and some I'm even more confident on than I was before. So it's an interesting thing. But I think politics is very important, and I think there's ways to go about it without, because it's one of those controversial topics people don't like talking about. Religion and politics are the two things you shouldn't bring up on the dinner table, and those are my two favorite topics. So you have to get that settled. But yeah,
so what are your political leanings? Are you a libertarian like David Russell?
Yes. He's an anarchist.
I had an anarchist
A
phase.
Marxist.
I'm no longer an
According to
anarchist.
Titus, he's a Marxist here. So
I'm not
there
Marxist.
we go.
No, I'm definitely not a Marxist. No, I'm looking through my stuff right now. I'm a classical liberal or libertarian, however you want to say that. So, free market, economically conservative, socially. I won't use the word liberal, but socially, the government shouldn't really get involved if it's not hurting someone
Send
else.
me your
So.
stimulus checks is what I'm hearing.
I actually didn't get a stimulus check, for the record. Okay, I was dedicated. I was not going to take their money. So.
He'll send you a piece of paper.
I actually do, but just to verify, I have an anarchy hat and I have a taxationist theft hat.
You
So
seriously out of principle didn't get your stimulus check. Is that true?
dead serious.
Dude, get the check and send it to me. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, if you're against high taxes, just consider it a tax break. It's the same thing.
It's still the principle of the thing, okay? It's just is.
He wants the deficit gone, Titus.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly.
All right, so hey guys, hold on one second. We got Mr. Lowry here. I want to let him come in because he's here and we got to let him talk a little bit, man. So, Mr. Lowry, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. I couldn't let Caleb get away with calling me out from sitting behind the keyboard.
Yeah, he's okay. He's from California, so they're all heathens over there anyway. So it's that's great.
Yeah.
I was going
to be seceded soon, so they wouldn't even be part of the United States after a while. So
yeah. Well, we have this crazy runoff going on, and one of the candidates literally just did an ad with a grizzly bear in it, and his whole thing is that he's the beast for our state. So it's going to be pretty interesting here the next couple months, I think. So.
Caitlyn Jenner and stuff running there too. It's all fun.
Oh, it's really growing up in a conservative family for California, which is probably a liberal family in most of the red states, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's still very interesting, just the politics of it all. Because there's still this tendency to try and want to be I guess non-conformist or something like that, contrarian and stuff like that. But it's very interesting how politics has sort of evolved in our state, and especially growing up in the shadow of John MacArthur's seminary and how that affects your theology. So,
I'm sorry. It's okay. I have Al Mohler's seminary in my city, so
what are you talking about? You live in the shadow of Ken Ham.
That's true. Although the Creation Museum is not in my city, it's probably an hour away from where I live. But
as close enough.
Yeah, that also explains the comment for the record of he's been to the Creation Museum and loves it. Okay, that was first of all, I was probably in middle school, and maybe younger than that the first time, and it is a fun experience. Okay, so whether or not you agree with it, it's definitely interesting to see. I'm not advocating for it. I don't agree with it at all. If we can get Ben Stanhope on the show, which I think he says he might do it later on, David, but we can talk about that. So he's definitely the person to talk. But
well, I am totally committed to flying out there and doing a full exegetical review with you.
I'll join you if you ever do. Let me know. I'll join you.
You're making an event, guys. PORA event.
Well, I mean, David's in Virginia. He's not too far. He could.
No, I'm not.
Drive out.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I was thinking about taking the family there one day and just poking my nose around and let my kids get lost. And, I don't know. We'll see. But I have the Bible Museum over here, so I'm really psyched on that, man.
Mm-hmm.
I went up there. I spent like 2 hours in the Bible room. Basically, it's basically they got all these old Bibles there, man. They got one of Martin Luther's Bibles. They've got they got some of the Dead Sea Scrolls there. They've got a whole bunch of stuff there, man. It's amazing. And just to see something that was signed by Martin Luther was pretty cool. To see something that was signed by other people, I mean, it was just really, really cool to see. And then to see how the copying process and the chairs they used and kind of like the method they used and stuff like that, just being able to walk around and they another thing they had there, they had a piece of the Second Temple there, a piece of the broken temple. So I got to touch that and just they allow you to touch it. So I touched it and just to know that Jesus' voice echoed off that pillar was it was moving, man. It almost brought tears to my eyes, man. I loved it, man. I love that museum, man. Just to go there and see the ancient Greeks. They had P-175 there, which was really cool. So when you see like one that was, it's like the end of Luke, first part of John, and you see that, the text hasn't changed like the guys knocking on your door tell you. It's actually the same. And I even showed it to my kids, and I read it for my kids, and I was like, now, what does it say in your Bible? And they're like, yeah. So I was like, what are you going to do when someone tells you it's not the same? So,
part urban.
Yeah, so
you have to doing all that.
But anyways, yeah. So, we got a question for you, Caleb. Just rolled in. What do you think about the wars in the Middle East?
They shouldn't be going on, and I'm not a big fan of them. So actually, Daniel and I talked about this the other day, which is kind of funny. But I would personally prefer, and I know that it gets very complicated, but I'm generally not an interventionist at all unless we're directly attacked. So I think we've been in the Middle East for 20 years now, and I would agree with taking troops out. I mean, granted, we have to do it in a safe way where you don't create ISIS again, because the first time we left, it didn't end well. But I'm not a big fan of overthrowing dictators and getting involved in business that doesn't directly affect us, and dropping bombs on Middle Eastern kids. So that's generally my stance.
So what I'm hearing is that you're pro Iraq War 2, but anti-Iraq War 1. Interesting.
I'm not even pro for the Kuwait one in the 90s, the Persian Gulf, because I know that's our oil, but of course, I'm not saying should we even have oil reserves over that are owned by us. So that's that kind of gets into whole imperialism and all that long rabbit trail stuff.
Do you want to debate Christian anarchism at some point?
I'm no longer an anarchist. Well, okay, I guess I'm an anarchist.
I would be defending it.
Titus is a Christian anarchist. So
okay.
let's let Titus chime in here on Christian anarchy.
So it's kind of just a provocative term that I don't identify fully with, because Christian anarchists can cover a lot of ground. I'm the sort of Christian anarchist who actually believes that Romans 13 is inspired, but the way that I would understand Romans 13 is that the government is in rebellion to God, specifically to Jesus' instructions in the Sermon on the Mount to love your enemies by using violence and coercion. Nevertheless, God still uses them for his sovereign purposes, in the same way that he used Pilate to get Jesus crucified, in the same way that he used Assyria to punish Israel and then punished Assyria for punishing Israel, So you can only punish someone if they're doing something that's sinful, right? So even when people do sinful things, God can still use them. So I think that all human governments are under rebellion, or they're in rebellion against God, and nevertheless, God still uses them to control, the chaos of the planet. But really, it's the foundation is my conviction of Christian nonviolence. So if you understand the gospel in terms of Jesus is king as the central core tenet of the gospel, the announcement that the rule and reign of God is coming back to earth, it actually has some very serious political implications, that this is an actual real nation that we're citizens of. And that's core to the gospel. And then we would understand allegiance to other nations as a form of treason. Not that everyone who's voting and in the police force is going to hell because of treason. There's obviously a spectrum of, we're all wrong at some point. So,
Westboro Baptist Church
it's a pretty radical view. What'd you say?
Westboro Baptist Church thinks all soldiers are going to hell, but if you want to play that game, but I think there's a lot. I would agree with a lot of what you said there. I think the whole nonviolence is very important to me. That's the whole foundation of political libertarianism, is the idea of the non-aggression principle. Oh, hi, Dale. And Dale's Canadian, so it's okay. We're talking about American
politics. Is this Dale from Skeptics and Seekers?
This is Dale from Skeptics and Seekers.
It is, although I'm from Real Seeker.
Yes, Real Seekers Ministry.
From former SNS fame. So.
Yep. But I forgot what it was. But I would agree with Titus on the whole nonviolence thing. That's an interesting interpretation of Romans 13. I kind of thought the same thing with the verse about render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. I think he's saying that, yes, you do owe authority to the government, but the government is also doing an immoral thing by collecting taxes from you in the first place. So it's kind of it's like if you're supposed to obey your parents, but your parents are being immoral if they're commanding you to do certain things that are immoral. So I think you could take double entendres there. But I do think it's funny how the anarchist is telling me to take money from the government. But okay, whatever.
So with Romans 13, I lay it out as a logical syllogism. So if you go back to Romans 12, it says, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves." Then Paul echoes the Sermon on the Mount there. Return good for evil. And then Romans 13, it says that the government is an avenger, and it's the same Greek word used there. So premise 1, Christians are not supposed to use vengeance like this. Premise 2, the government uses this sort of vengeance. Conclusion, Christians should not be in the government. I don't see how anyone can get out of that airtight syllogism.
So you're saying that I'm doing something by going into politics, that I'm being a part of that?
Well, you said, you said you're a pacifist, or are you a hard pacifist, or are you just a peace lover who thinks that in certain situations it's still right to use violence or lethal violence?
In self-defense, I don't believe in violence for things that don't. I think if it's in a defensive way, as in someone's trying to rob you or murder you, then yes, the government should step in and say you can't do that, because there's basic rights we have for life, liberty, and property, right? That it's the idea is you're free to do what you want as long as you don't infringe on the rights of someone else against their will. So if I give you money for a service, that's fine. If I force you to give me money, then that's immoral, which is why I think taxation is morally questionable as well, unless it's for specific things like police and stuff like that, where everyone will use it. But yeah, I think with wars, I'm a pacifist unless it's self-defense, because if it's self-defense, then I think that's reasonable. But I would never say that, if another Pearl Harbor happens, we should do nothing. I wouldn't go that far. But I do think that things like prostitution should be legal. I think that drugs should be legal. That's a controversial one to end the war on drugs. I would like to see income tax gotten rid of and maybe go to a sales tax of some kind, corporate tax gotten rid of. So lots of things on that, but that's generally the views I have. I don't know if David Russell, I know he's a libertarian. I don't know how far he goes on stuff like that too, because
I'm a constitutional conservative, so
okay.
I'm more that way. But yeah, I hear most of what you're saying. Let's welcome Dale. Hey Dale, what's going on, man?
Hey David, how's it going?
I'm glad you could make it, man. I didn't think you would. I know I gave it to you last minute, but yeah, man.
Yeah, I almost missed it. I just saw an email saying join this thing. I just clicked it. So here I am.
He didn't even know you're joining.
Yeah, right. Well, we welcomed Caleb to the show, and I said, hey, well, let's grill Caleb. Let's see what he's all about, and, introduce him the right way and do this formally. So.
And
Awesome.
because I'm a one-trick pony, we started talking about pacifism.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Nice. Yeah.
I like
Titus likes to be wrong all the time.
Every time I come on the show, we talk about this every bloody time.
Yeah.
It's your favorite topic. We all have our own pet topics and that sort of thing. So yeah, good stuff.
Well, let me say that his politics is better than his view on hell. So there you go. That's a backhanded compliment, but there you go.
Oh, okay. What is Titus's view on hell?
No, it's because we had a debate about.
Oh no, we can talk hell. Hey, we're here.
We
now.
did hell last time.
It don't matter. We can talk about anything. This is
the hell,
open.
it's a hell of a topic, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, it was Paulman last time was on here, and him and I got into it on hell. No, I'm more of a tentative universalist, and he's annihilationist, which is what we were debating last time.
Which Dale, that means they're both wrong. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Russell believes in eternal torture chamber, so it's fine.
Of course, you would describe it like that because you don't understand the view. I thought you said you read The Great Divorce.
I'm reading it at the moment. I'm going back.
Oh man! Okay. Hey, you know what's really cool, guys? Is C.S. Lewis's books. A lot of them are on YouTube for free now. So you can listen to the audio books because the 50-year trademark, I guess, is no or copyright is no longer valid. So yeah, I've listened to 3 C.S. Lewis books in the last 2 weeks.
I'm reading a playlist of C.S. Lewis doodle, just going over some of his talks and stuff like that was delivered originally on BBC that have been animated. I find those immensely helpful, especially if you're familiar with any of Plantinga's style arguments, because it seems like Plantinga is a much more. There seems to be a bit of inspiration in some of Plantinga's popular writings that seemed to be more of a thoroughgoing formulation of what Lewis was kind of angling at in some of his writings.
If you say Plantinga 3 times, David Palman appears, and
Plantinga,
or you might make him disappear.
maybe he will. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just uncanny. Yeah, I don't know. Dale, did you have any points you wanted to discuss? Or I know you just joined in, but you're a smart guy. You know a lot of stuff, so I'm sure you have something to talk about.
Like a question or something. Yeah.
It's a question or topic or comment or whatever.
Yeah, well, I guess I just finished my semester and that sort of thing. So one of the things I took a philosophy of aesthetics course. So maybe I'll just throw it open to you guys. What do you guys think of the argument from beauty for the existence of God and that sort of thing? It's something that I've kind of ignored in the past, but I was forced to kind of look into it a little bit. So yeah, what do you guys make of that?
So I'll let Caleb go first, and then we'll take it to Titus, and then Lowry, Mr. Lowry. I hope I'm saying that right, or otherwise I'm just going to call you a mighty duck.
It's perfect. I can't tell you how many times I've had my name mispronounced for like school assemblies and stuff like that. So thank you, Mr. Russell.
Yeah. And by the way, Dale and Daniel, I think, have talked because they're both big Shroudies. For those who don't know, if you get them talking about the Shroud of Turin, we can do a whole thing on that. But anyway, I'll answer Dale's question before we get off topic. So, I will be honest, I have not looked into this a lot. I have written on the moral argument before, but from my lay perception, it seems to me that the argument from beauty is essentially just a different version of the moral argument, because I think moral value is essentially something that's beautiful, right? That's perceived as good, and so. I guess my issue is I don't know how you'd be able to prove objective beauty unless you're going to appeal to like a properly basic belief, which is what you could do for morality. But I guess to me, it seems more obvious that moral truths are real than it does to me that things are objectively beautiful. But again, if you're saying that human life is beautiful, that's fine. But I think it's just the moral argument at that point. So that's just what I would say.
All right, Titus?
Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts on this. I mean, I guess I could see a route that evolution could take us, that we would start, viewing things as beautiful because it's advantageous for us to do so. Like, it's not advantageous for us to think that poop is beautiful because we can get diseases from it, right? So, I don't know, but maybe that's an oversimplification of the rebuttal to that argument. I don't even know what the argument from beauty would be, so maybe you should lay that out first.
You haven't been on the internet enough, Titus, that you'd be surprised what some people are into. So just
I'll let Dale lay it out for us here in a minute. Mr. Lowry?
Well, I'm trying to remember the YouTube video, or the YouTube video maker that produced actually a pretty decent explanation of some of the arguments from beauty. I think it's Apologetics Squared. And he did sort of a response to Godless Engineer on the argument. And I thought that was kind of a good explanation of some of the angles of the argument and the different forms it could take. For me, especially being a composer by trade, the argument from beauty is something that is very intriguing to me. Although I know, like Caleb, he and I, it's kind of interesting that he compared it to the moral argument, because I had a very similar predilection about it. And in my discussion with Caleb, I've sort of explained that the argument for morality is not one of my favorite arguments. However, there is a way it could be formulated if one, like someone like me, who's coming from, maybe contingency or cosmological arguments, already has a concept of a maximally great being already being established by other arguments, and then approaching the argument. At that point, as a theist, it seems like the argument is more probably true, given once you already have that sort of established sort of theistic belief, that it makes more sense that beauty would be real on a theistic framework than maybe not. As a composer, I find that to be extremely interesting just from my work. Just it sort of forces me to ask, what exactly am I doing in my line of work, and how does that relate to who I am as a person, how I worship God, and vice versa. So I find the argument from beauty to, if not to be the most persuasive argument, to still be a very worthwhile sort of thought experiment, just going, what exactly are we doing when we talk about music, art, and how it relates to God?
So yeah, and you know, I am going to bring up properly basic beliefs here in a little bit, especially hopefully Paulman does get a chance to come on because he is debating right now. But yeah, so the argument from Beauty Dale, oh man, I didn't do much with it either. Like you, it came up in college, and like Caleb said, yeah, like the moral argument. I think the moral argument, and there's a reason philosophers say the moral argument's so strong, is because moral realism we're directly acquainted with, as David Paulman would put it, and Caleb would probably say it's properly basic, but Paulman would say he's directly acquainted with it. But I would say that we're directly acquainted with it too, because I'm more of a foundationalist myself. But yeah, I think that okay, so here's my view on beauty. It is a lot like the moral argument, and it is we do experience it, and I think it's very powerful. It's a very powerful argument. I mean, one of the first things that were attacked in this last century was beauty, and once beauty went, moral relativism came in next. So without beauty, without beauty being real, everything else becomes kind of subjective in that way. So the biggest mistake I think that I grew up with and grew up hearing was that beauty's in the eye of the beholder. No, I think we can make a positive case for things being objectively beautiful. And I think that we can't forget that, because once we lose sight of that, it's easy for things like relativism to creep in, because if there's nothing that's actually beautiful, then what's to say there's something that's not actually right or actually wrong? So if beauty's relative, why not morals? Why not epistemic truths? I mean, we're just giving way too much ground to the skeptic there. But yeah, Dale, lay it out for us, man, if you'd like.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and like I said, I'm new to it as well, so it's kind of just coming to grips with some of the positions that are out there and everything. And first of all, I just want to say, yeah, it was great talking to you as well there, Titus. I know that you had to go, but while it lasted, it was great. But yeah, so in terms of the argument of beauty, so yeah, I think that there are various positions, right, that people give. So, what is the nature of aesthetic values? And obviously that's related to moral values. It's all axiology, the study of values and that sort of thing. So they are related. And many philosophers have done that. So there's the non-cognitivist position. So like someone like Eyre would take an emotivist position. They'll say aesthetic values, and judgments, they're just all emotions. We're just expressing our emotions. Other people, cognitivists, would say, no, they're expressing actual truths and that sort of thing. It's actually true that this thing's beautiful or not. And that divides up into, subjectivists and that sort of thing, who will say it's all a subjective experience or an attitude or something like that. And then there's obviously the realist or objectivist position, which you guys were kind of advocating for and that sort of thing. There's something about the object itself, that the object, it has the property of being beautiful or that sort of thing. I sort of ended up in my little essay or whatever, I sort of ended up taking a position in between subjectivism and objectivism with aesthetic values. So it's a position known as dispositional realism. So this was argued for by people like David Hume and stuff like that. But it says the object is necessary. It has a dispositional property, a property that disposes a subject to having a certain proper aesthetic experience of some type. So it's kind of a causal conception. The object causes a subjective experience or attitude towards this. This is beautiful or this is ugly. But where I differ, where David Hume would try to argue that, okay, well, who is the person that's having this aesthetic experience? And they would say, well, it has to be a true ideal judge. And by that, he meant, the art experts, the elites within the art community. I kind of took his argument and then kind of said, no, actually, the true judge is God. So aesthetic values and judgments are grounded in God. He's the ideal judge. If an object, if God is disposed from a certain object and caused to have a certain experience, aesthetic experience, then that's what the nature of aesthetic values are. So that was kind of in a nutshell how I got to God, by using this dispositional realism, and then just saying that actually there are problems with assuming that it's a bunch of human elites as the true judge. It's got to be God. So I don't know if that made sense or if I was just
Yeah. I think that it comes. You know what Lewis says about the moral argument. And we shouldn't have. A man can't have an idea of a straight or a crooked line unless he knows what a straight line is. Or am I off on that?
no.
And that's the same with beauty. How do we know, ontologically that, this stuff's hitting us that way, So I kind of take that route as well when I think about it. But yeah, I just learned about it like it was literally my last class. It was one of the issues the professor brought up, and it was really cool. I didn't look into it as much as I'd like, but I'm thinking that it has grave importance for us because I do agree that once we let beauty go out the window, these things started having like a domino effect in Western culture, and you could see like the age of cool came in. The 1950s were famous for it in the States. We had advertisements, and that's when this consumerism really popped up, and these ideas popped up, and then they started viewing the cosmos without God, with the little green men. And, there was just a whole bunch of stuff that ended up happening. The 60s reaped that harvest, and we know what came after that. From the 60s, we got into psychedelic drugs in the 70s, or even more psychedelic drugs in the 70s and cocaine and so forth. And I think it really, it really brought relativism to the forefront of philosophical thought, at least in universities around the U.S.
Gotcha.
I don't know how it was in Canada, but
I was going to say it's kind of interesting because what you're sort of talking about, David, sort of reminds me of some of the stuff I was studying as a composition major, the deconstruction of composition styles and the way it functions. Granted, I feel like the academy and stuff like that always feels like a couple of decades ahead of the popular culture. So you end up from the turn of the century with the death of Mahler, and then you end up going through some really radical phases, and you end up with folks like John Cage in North America, right? So really, I think like probably the most iconic piece that most people might know of his would be like 433, which is 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, and really just asking the question, what is art, right? What is the role of performers? Is it just sitting in a room? Is it purely in the heads of the audience members and performers in really pushing the bounds and sort of those questions and stuff like that? So I'd be really kind of interested in seeing like a historical and social analysis of philosophical views on beauty and how that might be reflected in other arts, and then ultimately in popular culture too. That might be a place for future personal study for me. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, Caleb, what else you got to say, man? You got anything else for this?
For the argument from beauty?
Yeah.
No, I would.
Anything you want to add on?
Yeah. Again, I'm not overly. I from what Dale describes, I think that makes sense. I'm not competent enough and have not looked into enough to have an educated opinion, but it again seems to me that it's similar to the moral argument, which I unlike Daniel, really like the moral argument. So I have a whole chapter in the Theodicy book. The very first chapter is on the moral argument. So I think that, and of course there's differences. I'm not saying it's identical, but I think the general sentiment that there is value in the world and that value stems from an objective source is accurate. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah. Well, we're here to grill you, so you got to say more.
Well, we can talk about other. Yeah, we can talk about other.
Yeah, well, let's talk about your universalism. No, I'm just kidding.
Is this like a grill Caleb show? Because I know you.
Yeah, it is kind of a grill Caleb.
Okay, I didn't even know that. All right.
We can grill Caleb today.
No,
I'm dead serious.
I should grill Dale for not having him have me on his show more. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, you're welcome anytime. Yeah.
No, it's a joke. The last time I was on this show, we were interviewing Mike Lakota, and that went very well. But
it was an awesome show. Yeah, and I know you like the after show and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll bring you on sometime this spring, summer for sure.
You can do spring. Well, I'm working on this very large book on well, it's about the resurrection, but it's tying it into contemporary miracles and visions of Jesus. So if you want to talk, I know you've had shows where you talk about some similar stuff like that, and of course Daniel I know has looked into that a little bit more too. But I don't know, maybe you can wait closer to when it comes out or whenever. But that doesn't matter to me. But yeah, not to plug in my own stuff there, but
well, with what you said about the moral argument and the argument for beauty, we understand that you're not a philosopher here. That's me and Dale's field. So that's why we're divided on this side here, because me and Dale believe in the real view of hell, the one C.S. Lewis taught us, and you don't. So
it's Dale and I, by the way, not me and Dale.
Dale and I, me and Dale. I'm from the South, bro. Come on, man.
Virginia is not the way.
Y'all. We were South. Trust me. This was Robert E. Lee's home.
Right. No, I'm sure everyone takes that well.
We have more presidents in this state than everybody else's state combined. No, I'm just joking.
Kentucky was neutral during the Civil War. Okay, so we're neither here nor there. We were like the cutoff point.
And just like West Virginia, and there's hillbillies there too. So
that's true. Yeah.
What a place being a Canadian here. So I have no idea.
You know.
Yeah. Hey,
we love our northern neighbors,
especially their sports.
We're not better than the Caps, my friend.
He's gonna go see a hockey game while eating his poutine covered in maple syrup, but he bumps into someone and says, "Oh, I'm sorry about that."
The maple syrup that he got from the tree itself.
Yes,
from the
exactly.
tree itself, next to the Tim Hortons while he was getting.
Yeah, next to the Tim Hortons. Yeah.
You know what's funny, Dale, is my grandfather was from Vermont, so he actually
basically Canada.
Huge on the maple syrup, and he would always bring like the stuff from Vermont down to New Hampshire. It was great.
Yeah.
He even had like maple candies and stuff.
You all have Monopoly money too, the colors.
But you know what's even better than that is maple icing with bacon on a donut.
Oh wow, sounds good.
Oh, cronut, is that what it's called or something? I think.
Yeah,
cronut.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I've never tried that. No, it's not for me. But yeah, I know what you're talking about for sure.
Oh come on, Dale! Everybody likes bacon.
I like bacon. Just keep it in its own place,
Okay.
I don't know. Have you seen the donut burgers here? Although I haven't. I don't know if that's the thing here, but of course it's America. So we have hamburgers where you'll have 2 donuts instead of buns, and they'll eat it, which is a lot. Yeah. Fried Oreos, fried everything. If you're at a state fair, but yeah.
Although the fried onions are really good, like the big blooming onions.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Go for those.
Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah, let's move on from this. Dale, the argument for beauty, that was a great one to bring up, man. I appreciated that, and it gave me some firepower to shoot at Caleb, so I appreciate that. He also hasn't sent me any of his books yet. He was supposed to send me some so I could review them for him, but he hasn't done it yet. I'm a little offended.
I sent David one.
I know Paulman gets it out of all people.
I thought you said you bought the Resurrection one on Kindle.
I did.
Okay.
I just need I want some paperback with some signatures, dude.
I'll give it to you eventually. I'm out of school now, so I'll have more time. But the reason I can't, I'm reading Lewis, but of course I'm writing my own book, so that I'm going back and forth between it. But I have to read stuff for that book and research, so it's a lot. Okay,
I just got my books for this semester, so I'm actually back in school now. I did take like the last month off. It was great.
Right.
But
I guess I could ask Dale, because I know that I haven't listened to all of your shows, but I believe you did do one of the miracles one time. So I guess what's your opinion on stuff like that? What's like the most compelling case you know of and stuff like that? If that's a good question, I don't know if he feels comfortable answering that, but
and sorry for what to do with miracles?
I said, do you have like a particular case in mind that you think is like good evidence, or do you just the general philosophy behind it, or I guess what's your opinion if someone asked you, said, hey, what do you think about miracles, and should I believe that they still happen today and stuff like that?
I do lean in the direction that I do think that miracles, like miracle healings, if that's what you mean, happen today and that sort of thing. Obviously I'm a fan of Craig Keener's books on this. I think it's one of the best. In case you've got them, there you go. So yeah, he does a great job in laying out the cases, especially in the second volume. I was kind of impressed, believe it or not, with Lourdes, even though it's a Catholic site and I'm Protestant and that sort of thing. I thought that they have certain cases where they've even got peer-reviewed literature, and I kind of set up links to some of the journal articles for some of those cases. And they have such strict criteria as to, they do follow-ups years later. They do investigations into the character of the person by interviewing people. They also have to have before and after medical documents and that sort of thing. So yeah, I remember being impressed with some of the cases from Lourdes. Also, other cases where it's medically documented, I think, are obviously very powerful for skeptics and atheists. Although, for whatever reason, David Johnson wasn't convinced. I don't know why, but
that man.
Did he give a reason, or he just did the Dillahunty of, well, I'm not convinced? It's like, well, I'm sorry you're not convinced. I don't know what else to say.
So I think the name was Ben Godwin, and I provided the X-ray.
Oh yeah.
And his answer to that was just, yeah, but those can be mistakes or something. Maybe they put the wrong name. So it was an X-ray of someone else and they put the wrong name on. That was his answer to.
So much for evidence, right?
Yeah.
Actually, you could technically go in and if you wanted to really be, if he was going to have this hypothesis, we can go in and look and say, okay, are all the details of the leg similar, right? Like, are the lengths, you could scientifically tell whether or not that's the same leg or not, I'm sure. Or you could just go ask the doctor or something. Or, the fact that he felt pain, I think it's like obvious that, the fact that his leg was already broken. For the people watching this, that just give context, Ben Godwin had severely broken. He actually didn't even break his leg. The bone came out of his leg. He was in a biking accident. 3 inches of his tibia laying on the ground next to him. They put pins in his leg and said he's either going to have to get it amputated or he's going to be crippled his whole life. They go to a prayer meeting. A woman has a vision of God putting the bone back in. He feels something. He goes back, and the leg is completely restored. 3 inches are completely there. They take the pins out, and there's X-rays of it. And I actually have that in my book. I have the picture of the X-rays, which I'm sure Dale is familiar with, and some of the other ones. And I have Lourdes in there too, which he was talking about as well. So yeah, stuff like that. But if it was like one case, you could maybe do it. But I think it's the plethora. It's right. It's the amount. It's the fact that we have so many of these like this. That if documents are being switched and mistaken this often, then I think we should be severely concerned with our healthcare system. If misdiagnoses are happening this often, right? Yeah. 55% of American doctors, I don't know what the Canadian statistics are, but American doctors, over half of them believe that they personally witnessed a miracle. So if all of those are mistaken or misdiagnoses, then oh my gosh, are we in trouble of over half of our doctors apparently being incompetent or making that kind of mistake?
It seems almost unfalsifiable at that point, that because you already have the testimonial evidence from the person that actually is claiming the miracle, right? And then it depends on the case, right? But if the personal physician was looking over it and they're impressed by it, then you at least have, sort of the basic eyewitness sort of accounts, right? And yes, you can account for this by hoax or misdiagnosis and stuff like that, right? A priori. But once you start adding in the documentation, like the scientific literature, or the actual just medical tests and stuff like that, it becomes more and more ad hoc to sort of appeal to either this is just a mistake or this is, element of fraud and stuff like that. It just has to get more and more involved. And to me, it's kind of interesting that he went the route of just going, well, it must have been a mistake, because that's one route. The other route I've heard is just like, well, there's some unknown naturalistic cause that for whatever reason happened at this one point that doesn't really
when the prayer happened, just conveniently. Yeah.
Right. It's, guys, and you guys know this, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, it's volitional. There's enough evidence out there, I think, and when you're presented with cases that really jeopardize that naturalism, or that naturalistic position, people don't want to hear it, man. And you'll get criticized for it regardless. It's crazy.
The issue is not the actual data; it's dealing with the philosophy or the metaphysical worldview disagreement, and that seems to be the point where the conversation needs to be had at that point.
Yeah, and Dale, you brought up Lords, because I know you're not Catholic and neither am I, but that kind of gets into the interesting question of like, where do we put our own like theological biases ahead? Because I don't know how much. I was going to ask your opinion too. I don't know how much you know about Our Lady of Zaytun, which was this very famous Marian apparition in the '60s and early '70s. Plenty of photographs of it in Egypt, right? Hundreds of thousands of witnesses see this light source. It was investigated by the government. They could not find any cause for the light, and there's been other explanations, but they all have issues. So it's like I can't explain how this happened or why. But I also admit as a Protestant, like I have that bias of not wanting to admit that was Mary, because that would be very weird for my theology to think that Mary just appeared to these people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, where do you let the evidence go? I mean, same thing with I talked to Dan about this too, like a Eucharist miracle, right? You have some cases where communion wafer will start to bleed and become a heart, and it's been looked at by scientists, and some of the times it's published in journals. And it's like, what do I as a Protestant? I mean, granted, there are some Protestants who accept the real presence and stuff, but like, I don't believe that's like, at what point does the evidence change my own worldview, I guess is the question.
Yeah, that's what I was, believe it or not, I was just going to raise to you, because you're writing a book on it.
Wow.
And I don't know if it's already done, so like it may be worthless. But one thing that I think hasn't been done, and I've discussed this with Craig Keener, for example, is I think we can develop. So miracles happen for different reasons, right? Not obviously, miracle healings. Many times the reason is it's just a miracle of compassion. It's not attached to a religious message necessarily, or that sort of thing. So what I would be interested in is seeing modern day miracle healings and developing a case from them that it's authenticating a given religious message. So, for example, with that is the miracle actually attesting to the truth of Catholicism or Christianity or Islam or something, or is it just a miracle of compassion? Like that would be my recommendation for you, is kind of develop a case from that front. And the most promising area that hasn't been explored, like Craig Keener just has like a brief section on it, but he mentions like what I call religious contests or power. I think he calls them power
encounters. Yeah.
Where two religions are kind of facing off each other, like in an almost Old Testament battle, and Christianity comes out on top, showing that, this is the one inspired by God. I'd like to see more research maybe done with that to kind of say Christianity is the true religion. I don't know if you know. Yeah. What do you make?
Yeah. I think that's a good point. It's funny. I hate to spoil all of my research right now, but in the chapter on miracles and other religions, I bring up examples that I don't know how to explain, and I'm saying maybe these could be legitimate. But the defense I give is that I think what's different is that in the case of Christianity, it's the only religion where miracles are being used as the primary cause for conversion, right? You see these huge growth rates in the third world from Pentecostalism because of miracles, where miracles in other religions don't typically cause conversion. They just happen and people accept them. But you don't see very large amounts of people converting to Hinduism or Islam because of miracles. It's usually because of birth rate. So if you're going to grant that some of these are from God, then it seems ironic that God seems to be doing these primarily for the case of converting people. And if you add in the Visions of Jesus research, it's just interesting to me that Jesus is the only figure you see appear to Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists, but you don't see it the other way around, right? Why is Krishna not appearing to Christians more often? Why is Muhammad not appearing to Hindus more often? It just seems interesting to me that all of these are only going one way. So I think that's also a case that needs to be brought up, because when people talk about the resurrection, it's hard to deal with pluralism, because someone can grant you, God rose Jesus from the dead, but they might believe in other religions and think that that's legitimate too. So I think when you take this argument, you're not only defending like the resurrection and Jesus being alive, but you're defending Christian exclusivism as well. It's an argument against pluralism, which I think the historical resurrection argument by itself doesn't really do as well. So I think it's just an important element to add.
Awesome. Yeah. I look forward to seeing what you got when it finally comes out and that sort of thing, for sure then.
Yeah.
Right on, gentlemen. So let's let Caleb now give us another topic here, because it's his turn, and I've been grilling him tonight and making fun of him at times, and let him get blindsided with politics. But yeah.
Gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. I don't know. You all had an eschatology panel, right? I don't know if that's an appropriate topic, if it's that's been done to death, or I don't really know.
Oh no, we haven't done much on it. Yeah, we did have one.
Okay.
We did have a panel on that.
Well, I'll bring up something specific, and then I'll get your all's thoughts on it. That I guess. So in the book, I have in one of my appendices, since I'm talking about visions, I have one account that ties into eschatology that I'm curious. I don't really have an opinion about it, but it's interesting to me. So, I'm personally a preterist. I think that Jesus was talking about the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and that was not the second coming, but the coming of the Son of Man, right? That a lot of the apocalyptic imagery is referring to the fall of Jerusalem. It's not this far off future event.
Hold on. Before you go any further, are you a partial preterist? Which is classical preterism.
You're going to have to define what you mean.
Is Jesus coming back at some point?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then you're good. You're not a heretic.
No.
Well, except for your universalism, but
no, he will still come back. But what I think is interesting is that, and this doesn't get as discussed as I think as much as it should, is that Josephus and Tacitus tell us that during the fall of Jerusalem and I don't know if this is during 70 AD or 66 AD when it started, that there were chariots and soldiers seen in the clouds fighting, like almost angelic soldiers. And that's just super interesting to me that parallels the whole idea of the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. In 1 Thessalonians, it talks about his army of angels, like I think literally in that case. So I don't know if that's jumping to conclusions and drawing parallels where there aren't any. But then you look at, I think Cassius Dio writes this, a couple weeks after that happened, Nero, who a lot of people think is the Antichrist in Revelation, while he is digging this canal, a trumpet sounds, and then the spirits of many people raise and are seen by Nero. And so when you compare that to Revelation, when it talks about the beast and the people he killed and executed and the sound of the trumpet, all that this trumpet will sound and the dead will be raised. All that just seems to me just to be really interesting how those coincide. So I want to know what your all's thoughts on stuff like that is, but I don't know if that was clear at all.
A little bit. Yeah, I think I got the gist of it. Mr. Lowry, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
I'm going to try and keep it short because my view on eschatology is very underdeveloped. I'll just say it's very interesting. I am a little worried about Caleb maybe leaning too much on a methodology that might be employed by like a Richard Carrier, finding parallels wherever.
Oh no, don't do that.
But with that said, on a more sympathetic light, I think it's kind of interesting because it kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the work that Rob from Sentinel Apologetics has done with looking at sort of ancient Near Eastern or even like prehistoric geology and finding correlates that could be sort of associated with sort of a local interpretation of the flood. So it's kind of interesting. That might be your next book, Caleb. So I'll defer to you on that.
I will have a long list. I'm sure I'll get to it eventually.
Right on. Dale, what you got for us, man? Have you done any looking into hell or eschatology since the panel debate?
I have not. So I've totally forgotten everything. I just kind of memorized stuff for the show, and then but I was trying my best because I am familiar with this argument from that Caleb was giving, but I've forgotten what the response is, and I'm like scanning over my old notes that I kept trying to find it, and it's not popping up. But yeah, so I guess I'll look for that, and I'll just send Caleb an email if I find it. But my basic position is, yeah, I don't think that a full preterist position is correct. I think that it is the end times are forward-looking, as even Caleb admits. Jesus, the second coming is in the future. It's going to come in the future, and I think that the Bible seems to be indicating that the various events associated with the eschaton will be futuristic as well. They haven't already happened. In terms of the fourth thing, like judgment coming and that sort of thing. I don't think it makes sense to say that, well, that was with the temple and that sort of thing. So yeah, I need more development with that once I scan over my notes, but that's the best I can do on the spot.
Right on. Yeah, I'm on the partial preterist train. I do think that a lot of what Jesus was talking about was about the second temple getting destroyed. I do think that Christ will come again at some point. I think it will be like a thief in the night. I don't see where, and I want to say dispensationalist. I don't want to say premillennial, because my heart is actually broken as we speak about this, because I found out Hugh Ross was actually a classical premillennial on our last show, and you know how much I like Dr. Ross. But I have a problem with a lot of the stuff that comes out of the whole Left Behind generation there. The whole idea that these temple sacrifice will be reinstituted, and all these guys trying to figure out what's going to happen. I think it really undercuts the fact that Christ was like, it's going to be like a thief in the night. It's going to come out of nowhere, and I don't see Jesus contradicting himself by saying, hey, no man knows this day or hour. It's going to be like a thief in the night. And then go ahead and say, well, there's going to be this moons or stars that fall from heaven and blah, 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 and just go on this long tirade. No, I think he was speaking to a specific issue that was going to happen in the near future. And, prophecy is one of the biggest things that skeptics or anybody secular will try to use to disprove the Bible, and for me that's a big red flag, on them. But back to eschatology. So yeah, my view is the same on that. I'm a partial preterist. I do lean more towards like the kingdom being the church age, so that would be amillennial in a way. So I don't think there'll be a 1,000-year reign, maybe if we're lucky, but I don't think there's going to be these unbelievers living with the believers. It just, to me, none of that really makes sense to me. And I know people will jump back and say, well, if the Bible says it, well, that's how you're reading it, and maybe you got it wrong. So the way I look at it, and here's my points, so.
And I'll just back you up. So I took the all-millennialist perspective as well. So good to know I'm right. David Russell agrees with me. So
I'll third that, just because I'm pretty sure that's the default position within my branch of Lutheranism. So
yeah, I read a lot of Sam Storms. I read some of Sam Storms. It's been a while, guys. But what really pushed me over the edge was Hank Hanegraaff's Apocalypse Code. He was like one of the first guys that got me into apologetics, and I was really into the end times. And this was this is over 15 years ago now. But I read the Apocalypse Code, and I was like, I got pushed over the edge there. I was like, man, this is really great stuff, because he doesn't just walk through like end time stuff, but he also walks through with how to kind of like interpret the Bible. He uses acronyms, and it really helps out. But yeah, after that, reading Sam Storms, a lot of his stuff on millennialism, I just find that the most compelling. But anyways, Dale, go ahead. I know you were saying something there.
No, I was just saying, yeah, I back you up on that. And that's actually the classical view, right? The traditional view before the notions of a literal millennium came up or something, or the rapture view. That's a very recent view.
The rapture, absolutely.
I don't think there's any rapture or anything like that, like Left Behind.
I always prefer the knowings portrayal.
Yeah, there you go.
I do think we'll get caught up in the air, but it's going to be the last day. Last day. Where everything changes.
I think, for the record, Left Behind was a much better book than movie. I did like the books. The movie was something, not a good something, but Nick Cage is.
Are you? But Kirk Cameron, man, come on,
Cameron,
Kirk Cameron was amazing.
That's true. Kirk Cameron did it way before.
He's been causing so much havoc in my hometown.
Oh no! Wait, does he live in the same hometown as you? Oh, Joe.
Same general area.
Yeah. Well, welcome on, Joseph Wooten. How you doing?
Hi. Am I coming in good?
Yeah, you're coming in perfect.
Sweet.
We're talking about the end times.
Yeah.
Well, now we are.
Yeah, that's why.
Topics.
That's why I decided to come on. I was listening for the whole time, and I finally decided to jump on.
Right on, man. So what do you got for us, man?
Okay, so I lean partial preterist on millennialist view, but I wanted to bring up my biggest grievance with this view, and it's that three of the passages seem to connect the resurrection to Matthew 24 and to the abomination of desolation. So in Matthew, with the parable of the wheats and the tares, where they grow up together and then they are separated when they need to be harvested. The end of the age is described. The righteous are described as shining like the stars in the up the stars of the heavens. That comes from Daniel 12. That's about resurrection. So when it comes to the end of the age, when the elect are gathered by the angels from the four winds, that sounds like that should be a resurrection there of all the elect, which causes problems with prosperity because that doesn't happen on that view. Also with Matthew, you can go to the last parable in Matthew 25. I don't think anyone reads that as being during 70 AD, but that's still in that same the Olivet Discourse in that book, anyways. So that seems to mess with that view a little bit. It would be strange why that's there. The end of the age is supposed to be 70 AD. Why is this end times prophecy here? I guess I can stop there. I'll bring up something else.
Yeah, I want to. Well, let's tackle that a little bit because, I mean, I don't have it up right now, and I'm looking for it. I've got to open up my apps and stuff. But if I'm understanding you right, yeah, I'd have to look it up. I'd have to actually read the entire scripture. I don't want to give a false view here, but with the abomination of desolation, and the harken back to Daniel, I think that was fulfilled too with Antiochus Epiphanes when he set up Jupiter in the temple. And then when it comes to 70 AD, they killed all the priests and threw their blood on the altar. So I don't know if that correlates at all or has any bearing on that. But maybe I'm not understanding you right. Caleb, what do you think?
Well, I would agree with the whole Antiochus thing. If he's talking about the Jesus describing the resurrection and equating that with Matthew, that I actually think is an interesting point. That's the hardest, I think, objection to the preterist view is that it doesn't seem like he's talking about two different events when you read it. It seems like he's talking about the same thing. So on the one hand, you get a lot of the imagery for the temple, but on the other hand, you get a lot of, the angels will come and gather the elect and the dead will be risen. And you're like, well, that assumingly didn't happen in 70 AD unless you're going to take what I said and assume that some dead people were raised in front of Nero. But even if we don't grant that, I have thought of, and I don't know if this might be somewhat controversial, but part of me wants to think that maybe Jesus was intentionally vague with his descriptions so that it would motivate people to go out and spread the gospel more. Because if they knew that he wasn't going to come back in 2,000 years plus, that might have affected it. And so I can understand. I think Paul thought Jesus was going to come back his lifetime. Peter did in 2 Peter. So I think that their insistence that the end of time was near may have bolstered up their willingness to evangelize the people. So some people might not like that view because it implies that it was misleading. But what was that? Oh, I thought I heard something.
You heard somebody's mic that wasn't muted. Continue.
No, I was pretty much done with that, but that's just I was pretty much done.
All right. Anybody else? I'm looking up the scripture, so I can't go. Caleb, take it away. Joseph, what do you have to say to Caleb's Nero objection there?
Well, I find his explanation that Jesus was intentionally vague to help the gospel spread interesting, though that's reading a lot back into the scripture that I wouldn't grant. Now, you'll have to go over the Nero part again because I missed that part.
So it was just a hypothetical, and again, this might be making parallels where there isn't one, but if you're comparing the Josephus passage where when the temple was falling or right before the temple fell, there were soldiers and things seen in the clouds, right? That's similar to what Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians and Jesus when he talks about the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. So some people think that could be a fulfillment of that. With Nero, I believe it's in Cassius Dio, or one of the Roman historians, talks about a few weeks after that event happened, when they were digging a canal, you hear this trumpet sound, right? Which is like 1 Corinthians 15, the trumpet will sound, and these spirits appear in front of Nero. And that's a weird detail to throw in. But if you connect that with like not only 1 Corinthians 15, but with Revelation, when it talks about the souls in heaven who had been killed by the beast, because typically Nero is associated with the beast in Revelation, right? Being killed by the beast and waiting up in heaven and saying, when are we going to be raised, Lord, and all that stuff. So I think you just get a lot of these similar ideas of, Nero seeing these dead people that he executed, and a trumpet sounding, and this happening at the same time the temple's falling. One could draw connections there and say maybe this is like a partial fulfillment, kind of like how Jesus was the first fruits of the resurrection. He was raised, even though they thought the resurrection was only going to happen at the end of time, and maybe some other people were prematurely raised, but the final resurrection won't happen until the end, when he returns once and for all. So that was just a theory. I'm not married to it or anything like that, but I just think it's an interesting detail that doesn't get a lot of attention.
Okay, so yeah, I just looked it over too. I think it's part of this whole apocalyptic literature that Jesus is giving. Right before verse 31 was, the Son of Man coming on the clouds, which is always that Old Testament judgment language.
And Daniel 7,
and then he will send forth his messengers with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds. I just think that's still part of that poetry that's going on there, and there's obviously a deeper meaning there that I would like to look further into myself. So, Dale, you got anything? I can always count on you.
Well, eschatology again is not my subject, but I think that there are some parallels. Yeah, like obviously Antiochus is what it's talking about there, and I can see. I've heard. What?
No, that was my fault. Go ahead, continue.
No problem. And I can see some links and that sort of thing with Nero. What like Caleb's trying to say. I think he's kind of. I don't know. I think he's kind of stretching it by saying like with the trumpet. No offense or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I buy that. I think the trumpet's meant to be this call. It's heard worldwide and that sort of thing, and then it ushers in the judgment from my readings and stuff like that. So I don't think you can make that connection based on that. That's sort of my take there. It's a little bit strained.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not like married to it. I think it's just an interesting theory that deserves more attention, but it is certainly intriguing to me nonetheless. But I admit that there are parts of it that are a little bit ad hoc in the rationalizations. But yeah, no, I get that.
Cool.
All right, gents. Well, what's next, Caleb? What would you like to talk about next? I do know what I want to talk about, and I'm going to bring it up later, but if you got heaven and hell.
Heaven and hell? Okay.
Heaven and hell.
I am going to bring it up. I don't know. I mean, Joseph, did you have anything in particular since you just joined, or did you just want to talk about eschatology? No. Oh.
Yeah, I was just bringing up that issue that I had with my preterist view. That's all.
Okay. No, you're good.
I'm going to stay here a while.
No, yeah, it's fine. I didn't. We're just moving on to different topics. I just didn't want to isolate people who had other stuff. Well, I don't know if this is going to be too big of a change, but I'm only saying this because I know we have Dale and Daniel both here, and so it's gonna. Yeah, I guess I was going to ask. So I personally, I know that they're both big Shroud people, know way more about it than I do. I personally am still not entirely convinced that it's authentic. I lean towards it being fraudulent. So I guess if I'm going to ask both of them to give me like their best 1-minute case as to why I should lean towards it being either supernatural or legitimate, because right now I'm uncertain, but I'm a little bit skeptical. So whoever wants to take that, I know they can both team up. By the way, David, I know that you've had Teddy on your show before. You should do a panel when you have Dale, Daniel, and Teddy all on there talking about it, because that would be even Habermas. If you can get Habermas on, You can do all that stuff. So
The shroud panel, the ultimate shroud panel.
yes,
that's
the
what we'll
ultimate
call it.
shroud panel. Well, I know Daniel disagrees with Habermas on some methodology stuff with the shroud, so he could talk. I'm sure he would like to talk to Habermas about that if he had the opportunity. But I'll let them talk.
Awesome. So yeah, in terms of a 1 minute case, so yeah, my argument from the shroud, believe it or not, I don't even care about the dating, even though the majority of my shroud shows are on the dating issue or the authenticity thing. That doesn't even matter to me at all. It's all about, can we prove that the images are miraculous, or their image formation was miraculous. So that's my sort of focus there. In terms of a one sentence, that's really hard to do.
I said 1 minute, doesn't be one sentence. I agree that would be.
Okay.
Yeah, he's being facetious.
Oh,
Gotcha. Okay. I'm too literalistic, but yeah. I guess I would just say, look, so in terms of my criteria for identifying a religious authenticating miracle, number one, we can prove it has certain physical chemical characteristics that have been scientifically proven beyond reasonable doubt. They're in the peer-reviewed literature. Those physical chemical characteristics cannot be duplicated, either in practice through actual experiments to try to duplicate them, or even theoretically, given the various artistic mechanisms that are possible to explain it, or the naturalistic explanation. So that would be direct contact or some kind of gas diffusion type mechanisms. None of these work in explaining how the images could have been formed, not even in theory. There's always a problem in terms of the body images and the blood stain images as well. And then it's obviously the Shroud of Turin is within a religious context that is serving to authenticate, Jesus died, and even his resurrection, given certain features of the body. There's body rigidity there. So, that, and then it would have had to have left, the images would have had to have been formed before 3 days or less, because the body's still in rigor mortis and there's not a sufficient amount of body liquids on the shroud and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's very basic, but yeah, that's my case in a nutshell.
Now you talked about reproduction. I've talked to Daniel a little bit about this. I have read that I think Garibaldi, what's his name, has claimed that he was able to recreate it with like certain acid powders. So is that true, or how exactly would you respond to that?
So he's lying, but
Okay.
I will say this: he's produced the best reproduction images to date. So using an artistic method. And I did an actual show. I think it's part 9, my Shroud solo show, part 9 and 10. And I actually provide links so you can see the photos and that. It's nowhere close to what we have with the Shroud. It's not a comparison. And that's just visually. Once you get into, okay, but does it actually reproduce the physical chemical features of the Shroud images? It doesn't. And Garlashelli himself admits this. I've got quotes from him saying, I didn't even come close to reproducing the Shroud's three-dimensionality or this, its superficiality or stuff like that. So, yeah.
Well, I'll just go a step further because
hold on. Caleb, you got the show for about 5 mics. I got to run real quick.
There you go. I was about to ask Daniel, just give me his spiel, like same question to Dale about the whole minute spiel. So he can go ahead and talk. Yeah.
Before I do that, I just want to go on with the Garlashelli thing. There was an article recently published by Paolo De Lazzaro, going against Andrea Nicoletti, who uses a lot of Garlashelli's research, and De Lazzaro kind of goes after Garlashelli because in a recent conference in Italy, he sort of went a step further from just saying I can't reproduce some of the superficiality or the microscopic image features. He's gone further and denied their actual existence. And I like what De Lazzaro sort of says. It's well, this seems to be a scientific method where he presupposes that it's a artistic method. He comes up with the best technique he can come up with. And then anything that doesn't fit that, he just automatically denies.
Well, it's unfalsifiable at that point, right? If it's, everything that disagrees with my theory is incorrect, so it can't be proven wrong.
Yeah. Another thing with with Garla Shelley's. Oh, sorry, Daniel. Go ahead. I didn't mean.
I was just going to say it's a nice parallel because I think it's even worse than what pro-authenticists sort of say about the carbon-14 testing, because at least there's questions that have been asked in the literature about it. Whereas Garla Shelley is, I mean, it's some of the most basic, some of the best attested data, and it's multiple that he has to just deny its existence. It's not just one test.
Yeah, I was just going to add, with Garla Shelley, I think Mark Antonacci makes this critique as well. Like he doesn't have one single coherent method in order to reproduce the features that he's claiming he's reproduced as well. He has to use different methods that aren't necessarily consistent with each other. And that wouldn't make sense with the Shroud of Turin, right? It's one process that made it. So,
gotcha. Wasn't there? I don't want to get too niche here. So, wasn't there a study in I think 2018 where they were testing the blood stains and people were acting as if that had debunked the stains on the shroud? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but I don't know if Garla Shelley did that study or.
Yeah, he did. Dale actually goes over one of his shroud podcasts, so that might be. And he also has a link to the original paper and also some of the rebuttals. So that's where I actually started with that rebuttal. So thanks, Dale.
Well, I guess I will ask, because I know both of you have seen it because I sent it to you. What are your all's opinions? Because Dale Allison recently wrote a book and he had a very short section on the shroud. So I guess I showed Dale this in email. I didn't really know what he thought about it. So I guess Dale and Daniel, what were your opinions on how Allison treated it?
Yeah. So as he said, and as you said in that email, so he's not really able to tackle the scientific evidence, and that's what most matters to me. I don't even care if, and I'm pretty much the only person who argues this, but even if the shroud is medieval, okay, God did a medieval miracle authenticating the religious message. If I can prove that those images are miraculous, that's all that matters, regardless of when it dates from. That said, I think that there is good evidence that suggests there's pretty conclusive evidence that it's definitely centuries older than the medieval period. So I kind of date it in two parts. It can go back to the 6th century with pretty good confidence. And then we can date it. It probably dates, and it goes back to Jesus and is authentic, but it's, in my opinion, the evidence is a lot weaker to establish that.
This might be a good point where I can sort of give like my 1 minute spiel and sort of distinguish how I differ from Dale and how I sort of view the shroud. Because I do like a lot of what Dale does, especially in his he has his big write-up where he's basically going through image mechanisms. And I think that's a very important sort of part of the mystery of the shroud. It's the question of what actually produced the image. So for me, I don't want to defend any one specific theory necessarily, because I do think to a certain extent some of the data points are somewhat underdetermined. I've been really curious about some of John Jackson's theories, and he makes some interesting predictions with radiation models. But unfortunately, some of the predictions that he makes that he's trying to verify some of those predictions or predicted features and stuff like that has proved somewhat difficult with the limited research. So what I try to do instead is to sort of ask major questions about what, from our starting points a priori, what could explain the shroud. So the two most popular would be it's a medieval artwork, and B, it's the authentic image of Christ. And then you can sort of ask different questions. Is it a natural image or is it a supernatural image? And what I try to do with taking from Dale's sort of point of view is just sort of to argue from a historical context. Well, one, an artistic explanation is not tenable, just from the various image features. And then some of the models, the more and more ad hoc they really become. I mean, yeah, people suggesting that for medieval photography as an option, that's sort of the equivalent of like Greg Cavan's twin hypothesis within shroud studies. But for me, I want to sort of, once I sort of look at that, not having to ask the question about dating, and just sort of go, if it is a medieval product, it's far better explained by some of these energetic models that are quite frankly supernatural in nature, just to understate it, just simply because certain features such as the lack of putrefaction, or even some of the difficulties of like gas diffusion models to really explain the image features without having to add on corollaries such as like there was an earthquake within a rock-hewn tomb, and then you just ask the question, who's crucifying people in the Middle Ages and saving their burial shrouds after 3 days? It really becomes untenable to sort of hold to sort of a naturalistic mechanism. So at that point, I want the skeptic to either go, well, it is the authentic burial shroud of Christ, or it's another just medieval miracle that attests to Christianity at that point.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think the medieval idea is really interesting because you're saying maybe it is medieval and the dating is correct, but God created this or put this image on there as a miracle. So that's definitely a very, I think, unique view.
It's definitely ad hoc, but it's one view that doesn't require you to deny the any of the scientific data.
So I guess the last thing I'll say on this topic before we move on is, have either of you looked, because I know the Shroud of Turin reminds me a little bit of a relic called Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is allegedly an image created by the Virgin Mary in the 16th century. So have either of you looked into, because apparently, and I have not read that much into it, that there's been studies on that, and it's like, oh, we can't explain how that appeared on there either. So have either of you looked into that extensively, and is it analogous to the Shroud and anything like that?
So I haven't looked into it extensively, but from what I have looked into it, yeah, it's not comparable in terms of the key physical chemical features. Yeah, it's not no comparison to the Shroud of Turin. What we have with that's really what is key. I call this the minimal relevant features approach. So it's comparable to Gary did his minimal facts approach for the resurrection. I've got my minimal relevant features approach for the Shroud of Turin. So
gotcha. Yeah.
I'll just add on. I haven't done a deep dive with the image of Guadalupe, although my Catholic friends are really pushing me to.
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
What I have sort of uncovered from folks within the Shroud community is that even those that might be Catholic or pretty sympathetic to Catholics like Barry Schwartz, they're very adamant that the science is nowhere near what's been done on the Shroud. I know, just for example, there has not been. They're not even. My understanding is that they're not even sure what material the image is made on. And at that point, because one of the popular arguments that I've sort of heard about the image is that it's been around too long for the material, because I think it's allegedly made on agave.
Yeah,
however,
I've heard
there
that
haven't
too.
been any scientific tests to really confirm that. And one possibility is that it's actually on hemp, which my understanding is that hemp would last throughout the centuries without fear of degradation. So that's just some of the very basic Shroud data that was collected in the previous century, or over the previous century. It has just not been done on the image of Guadalupe, or even some of the other alleged images of Christ, like the Manipello image and various others.
Do you think that, this will be the last question Joe has, do you think that there will ever be another chance where the Vatican will let people examine the actual sharks? I know that they look at pictures right now because they did this last study in, I think, 88, 2002 maybe, but do you think that the Vatican will anytime soon allow like another full examination like the ones they did in the 70s?
My understanding is with this Pope, that is not going to happen. The best opportunity that we probably had was with Ratzinger, just because I know he was involved with some of the. I think he was one of the scientific advisors during the 80s. So,
do you think the same way, Dale? Or
yeah, so I actually have. I'm friends with Barry Schwartz, who I had interviewed on the show. He's one of the experts that was involved in that STIRP study in 1978. So, yeah, he's on the inside track, and yeah, probably nothing soon, but I am hopeful at some point. I mean, things are going to change and that sort of thing. But yeah, nothing soon is probably going to happen. So, yeah. Unfortunately.
One thing just to add on is that every once in a while, materials that were collected during the 78 investigation or subsequent investigations do get experimented on. I know sometimes it can be a little bit controversial, just due to some of the Vatican's policy of not acknowledging tests made on materials collected after. But I do believe in 2015, scientists at the University of Padua began looking at dust samples that were collected during the 78 investigation. So every once in a while, some of those materials are still floating around, and every once in a while, new studies will get published on them. It's just the scope is just very. You have to be very. It's very modest in scale. Scale. Excuse me.
Gotcha. All right. Well, David Russell, we can move on to your final topic now, if you want, of heaven and hell.
No, okay. So what I was gonna actually just say was just about the whole idea of Christian fiction and the ideas of heaven and hell and just stuff like that. I mean, we don't have to go that route. I was mainly teasing you, but I did want to bring that up if we didn't have a topic there for the end. But I think we covered everything. And we had a good show, man. I think we're good. So unless you want to bring up anything else, y'all can continue talking to Shroud. This is cool stuff, man. Here's another. I mean, since we're on relics, I mean, what's the one that the lady wiped his face? The blood on the face. I think I just read something recent that there was some sort of correlation between that and the shroud. Like there was something that they found that brought them together. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I think what you're talking about is the Sudarium of Oviedo, in Spain. Is that what you have?
Just whatever rag that the lady wiped his face off with.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be that. I'm not sure.
Because I do know that there are some like images, like I know the Veil of Veronica and stuff like that. That's sort of associated.
Yeah, it's the Veil of Veronica, right? It's the one where she wiped his face.
That's not still around, is it? I think the Veil of Veronica is lost, isn't it?
Well, it's kind of it's hard to tell what's legendary material and what's not. I'm not aware of. I think one of the candidates is like the Manipello image, and again. I'll just defer to Barry Schwartz's take on that image. It's a bad painting. So I mean, if you're talking about the Sudarium, there have been pretty rigorous scientific studies, which I think Dale could probably talk about a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, I like this. So this is a great evidence that proves the shroud is not medieval, and it dates back at least to the 6th century or even 5th century or earlier. And this is basically the head cloth, right? So in the Gospel of John, you've got the multiple cloths, right? So this would have just covered Jesus' head, and it's got blood stains as well as certain, body fluids on it and that sort of thing. And the link to the Shroud of Turin is that, okay, well, the geometry of the body fluid patterns matches the shroud relative to its position. It's in a different position, but once you account for that, it's the exact same size and that sort of thing. So that's why there's a link to the shroud. They'll say, well, these two cloths must have been in the same place, and we can date, as I said, that Sudarium of Oviedo. We know its history. It has a known historical provenance going all the way back to Jerusalem. We have historical records talking about it and that sort of thing as it spread west, fleeing Islam into Spain. So that's huge, right? That gets the shroud out of medieval Europe and that sort of thing, and it links it to the Holy Land. And obviously the shroud is meant to depict Jesus, whether you think it's an art thing or not. That's clearly Jesus of the Gospels and that sort of thing, died on a cross and that. So yeah, that's sort of the significance of this is if it's true that it's linked. There's also other studies, but I find them less conclusive based on the pollens, based on the dirt and that sort of thing. But the main thing is the link between these patterns, and that shows that these two things covered the same dead corpse going back to Jerusalem. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's just interesting stuff. I mean, you look into these relics, and I mean, of course, you have what Notre Dame has the crown of thorns. I mean, of course, we don't know if that's
there's a lot of places that have the crown.
I know, right?
Right. We have 3 heads of John the Baptist in different churches. Yeah. I think we have a couple foreskins too. So
and India has part of St. Thomas. Yeah.
Actually, it's funny. I had a friend who did a mission trip to Cyprus, and he said that while they were there was this Orthodox church that had a not a monument. I'm trying to think of what the word is. A relic of where they said that where they thought Lazarus died. So apparently they say that Lazarus, when he was raised from the dead, went to Cyprus and then died there. and that was like their little relic of that. It's like, oh wow, it's like, but that just shows you how common those things are, even though it's like the evidence for that is
so I did
zero.
I did some research on Lazarus because I had to write a paper on Lazarus and that whole scene in the gospel. And there's not one, but there's two spots. The one that was found in 800 AD was the one that was most compelling to me, because when they weren't looking for Lazarus, right? They weren't looking for a body or anything, but when they came across the tomb or whatever, all it said was Lazarus, friend of Jesus, however many days dead, friend of Jesus. And I thought, I was like, that's something that, if you find something, you just come across something like that. That seems more authentic to me, because we do.
Where was this grave at?
From the tradition, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to get my paper. I might have the paper on my blog, but yeah. So it was really interesting, and just diving into the different. When I dove into the different studies, that was the most compelling to me, because it does make sense that he would go on to become a bishop, and that he would have to run away from for fear of his life, because he was somebody Jesus raised from the dead. I mean, who you want running around saying, yeah, I was raised by this guy, I was dead for 4 days, Yeah. I mean, so I could see that. So yeah, I said 4 days dead, friend of Jesus. And it was wild,
It is wild.
Yeah. So and it was found in 800 AD, so this had been, built upon and so forth since then. I don't know, Dale, do you hear anything about that as well?
So no, I'm pretty ignorant about the Lazarus thing.
Yeah, the Lazarus thing. It's pretty cool. I was really fascinated. I think my whole paper was on Jesus raising Lazarus, and when I was looking into it, the whole history of how the tomb was cut out, because Lazarus would have had a floor tomb, right? But all these tombs had what they called a soul window, right? And this would have a window where the souls could go out after they couldn't recognize themselves anymore, and they would go to wherever they went, which obviously is huge reference to the idea of an afterlife, because people had the whole notion, well, they didn't believe, Jews never believed in really an afterlife and stuff like that.
The Sadducees did, the Pharisees did.
But here's the thing, is like a lot more people, because Ehrman did a study on this, and he said, you could find annihilationists, and so forth, a whole bunch of different sects there. And but yeah, I mean, I think a soul window is a pretty incredible evidence towards an afterlife. So with that said, it was just really cool to see how they had all that, and how Jesus would have raised him, and how he would have came out of that tomb. Would almost be near impossible if it wasn't a miracle. I mean, it's just amazing.
I will say that I think that, even though I'm skeptical of most medieval relics, I am actually most open to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre being authentic. I am probably 75% confident that is authentic, which that's the most famous site of where Jesus' tomb allegedly was, that Constantine allegedly found. But there's actually quite a bit of archaeology to back it up. And what's really interesting is that the wall, that when they first found it, it was inside the walls of Jerusalem, and Jesus was crucified outside of the wall, so they said it couldn't be right. But when they kept digging, they found that there was a second set of walls that it was actually on the outside of, because Herod actually expanded the walls in 44 AD, and then of course they were destroyed after the fall of Jerusalem. So the whole point of, if this is a late tradition in the time of Constantine, I'm impressed that they would be able to know where those walls were and get that right, because it's not something you would know just hundreds of years later guessing, right? And they've dated funerary structures to about the 1st century, and it's the same kind of tomb that the Gospels describe. So all of that to me seems to imply that this probably was a place that was memorized, and that they preserved the tradition for hundreds of years. So I'm fairly confident that is legitimate.
Yeah, I agree as well. I had to change my mind, kind of thing. Years back when I went to Israel, I had the opportunity to go there. I had no clue.
Oh wow.
The tour guide's like, oh, I wasn't even a Christian, but he's just like, what do you guys prefer, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre or the Protestant, like the Protestant garden.
Garden tomb, yeah.
Garden tomb's not, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
no, that's nothing. But yeah, so I was like, oh well, let's go to the garden tomb kind of thing. So thankfully we went to both.
Okay.
Anyways, but yeah, when I realized after the fact that no, actually the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is probably the real place, I was like, oh whoa, that was crazy. I almost would have missed out on that.
And that research they just did, what was it, 2-3 years ago, where they
2016, I think.
yeah, they opened up it for the first time in years, and the people that went down there and whatever they studied down there, I mean, it came back pretty like some of the poems they said were from the first century. I mean, a whole bunch of weird stuff. You know?
They dated it because before that point, so the church has been destroyed several times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very long history, but from what I understand, that they tested it and they were able, because the thing when you go in, I know that Dale's been here. I've only seen pictures, so Dale would probably can attest to this in person. But I've always wanted to go. You have this epicure, or I think it's called epicure, and you have this like bench where it's like, oh, this is. He didn't actually lay on that one. It's underneath it because it's like cave. So theoretically, the burial place would have been underneath it. So the one you're seeing then is built, I think, during the medieval times. But I think they took that off and they said like in the cave underneath it, there was a stone tablet that dated to around Constantine's time. So they know that this is at least a spot that Constantine preserved. And then underneath that, I think they dated a little bit later than that, a little bit earlier than that. So it does match up with what was previously hypothesized. But it's definitely like a very old place. And there's no good evidence against it. At best, you could say it's inconclusive, but I don't think there's any good reason to think that it's not, other than just maybe lack of more. But there are plenty of Jerusalem archaeologists who do think it is. But on the contrary, nobody that I am aware of thinks the Garden Tomb is legitimate, because the Garden Tomb, I think, almost certainly dates like the 8th century BC, or it's way too old to be the legitimate tomb. So nobody takes that seriously but tourists. But it looks cool. Yeah,
it looks cool.
It looks what you would imagine it to be, but it's almost certainly not the right one.
Well, I was going to say, like, if you just listen to the reasoning behind the Garden Tomb versus the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the whole historical argument is just beyond weak in comparison, just because it seems much more like just reacting to how the site is today. Rather than actually, what's kind of interesting is that we're finding, when we test the Garden Tomb, we find that it dates far too early.
It's way too early. Yeah, it's way too early for it to be. Although
when you look at like Church of the Holy Sepulchre, we have that tradition at least identified within by the time of Constantine. And then you have the weird coincidence of it being outside the wall, which doesn't seem like it would be the easiest to invent. Or if you're going to invent a location, you're working off the Gospels, you're going to try and correlate it that way. And it just seems more and more natural that this
actually you could date it to. So even though Constantine's the first one to venerate it, again, a lot of this is based off of Eusebius. So depending on how much you trust Eusebius here, he says that in the 2nd century, I think like early 2nd century, Hadrian, the Roman emperor, had built a temple of, I think, Jupiter, one of the gods, on top of that spot intentionally because Christians were venerating it. And so it was almost a getting back at the Christians for that. And so when Constantine was first asking about this plot, all of the bishops pointed to this temple and said, oh, it's underneath here. And he's like, oh, why would it be underneath here? But they knock it down, and they ended up finding that there was this cave underneath there. So it is impressive that they would happen to get that right. They would happen to know that, yeah, there actually is a burial cave under this giant temple. Like, especially since that temple had been there for 200 years before Constantine was born. So that just seems very interesting that they would get that right if they were just guessing to say, oh yeah, it's underneath that spot, right? So
and you could thank his mother for that.
Yeah, that's true. It was a lot of Constantine's mothers.
Yep, she was the one that was really interested in that.
I was going to say some of the traditions around his mother discovering it, I think are the best argument against it, just because you might say
you think so?
Well, the way I've had it described to me is that, well, we can't really take the accounts too seriously because it's talking about like I think she says that, or in some of the accounts that she has like either visions or somehow providentially selects the site or something like that. But to me, that you kind of have to ignore a lot of the other data going in favor of it. It seems to me reasonable that in a political situation where where maybe it might not be so controversial in the immediate area, but if you're trying to convince, the whole Christian or the whole soon-to-be Christian empire that this is where Jesus was laid to rest, that you might try and invent some story to Or there
Well,
might be this sort of tendency.
I think that they said that I have to read the passage, and I'm pretty sure it used to be it says the bishops are the ones who pointed her.
Yeah.
She may have had visions to confirm it, but it wasn't as if she had this vision. The bishops like, oh, what that's.
I thought the whole visions for her was more towards the cross itself.
It might have been.
That's what.
Yeah, I might be. I haven't. It's been a while since I've looked up the sources.
Because she was looking for relics. She was looking for a piece of the original cross. She wanted to find that.
And those I'm a bit skeptical.
And I think that she got the tomb because of the bishops, from what I remember. But I could, it's been a while since I looked into it.
Which, by the way, Dale, I know that when you had Lydia McGrew on your show, someone asked her about why didn't they venerate the empty tomb? And I would have, and I think she said that she didn't think the church venerated things back then. But I would just say I think that we have good reason to think the Holy Sepulchre is legitimate. And I was a little bit confused when she said that because, even Jesus talks about people venerating the shrines of prophets. I mean, that was pretty common practice back then. To decorate, the tombs of David or the Maccabean martyrs and stuff like that. So I think we have every reason to think that they would have wanted to preserve the site and that they did preserve the site. So I didn't want to bring her into that again, but
Fair enough. Take that, Lydia.
No, don't take it.
No, I'm joking.
Her and I have been talking a lot in corresponding, so she's nice. I like her.
Oh, yeah, she's awesome.
We talk about the McGrews all the time in our chats, don't we, Daniel? With other people, and it's really fun.
Just man up and defend the Gospels, Caleb.
That's what they keep saying. They're like, Caleb, just say the Gospels are reliable. Why you have to keep dancing around it and trying to present yourself as doing that? So yeah. That's
just to go back to the whole veneration, because I know that gets brought up by Crossley brings that up as like an argument against the empty tomb.
Ludemon does too.
Yeah, I just never found it all that persuasive, just simply because you can take, like, if you think there's an absence of veneration, you can use that as an argument against the historicity of the empty tomb and an argument for it, like Tom Wright does.
Or Allison, it's funny because Allison ranks all of the arguments for the empty tomb, and he puts that pretty low because he points that out. He's saying people on both sides say, aha, they didn't venerate it, meaning his bones weren't there, meaning it must have been empty. And on the other side, aha, they didn't venerate it, meaning they didn't know where the body was. And so it wasn't. So it's like both sides seem to be trying to use that as a win point, which I don't think is persuasive either way. But
I think what could be said is just that if it is venerated, it's not a central part of Christian. It doesn't seem to be the most central aspect of their worship practices and how they commemorated the death and resurrection early on. It seems the way the hymns and the early creedal statements, it seems to be much. It doesn't seem to take quite as much precedent as one might expect if it was a major facet. But at the same time, I think this is just a data point that's more or less irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm going to bring it to a close now. Caleb, do you have anything to add? I sound like you're going to say something.
I would, but I should have brought it up earlier with the Lazarus thing, so it'd be a bit tangential. So I think we can just stop here.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all being on the show. Dale, always a pleasure. Mr. Lowley, it was great to meet you. Again, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And great talking with you and Caleb. And Daniel, finally, you're not just an email.
Yeah.
He's a lot scarier in person, I know.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than just, here's this link to this article I found.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Dale, you should have Daniel on your show sometime about the Shroud. It'd be fun to listen to it.
I'd be a little nervous about that because I know he has Hugh Ferry watching every one of those shows. So,
so he's just judging what he's saying about that.
Yeah, he's out there. Yeah, well, I'm bringing, as Daniel knows, I'm hoping to have at least a couple new shows trying a Shroud trial format where I'm going to bring on an actual medieval historian. And Hugh says he has a connection with an actual carbon-14 scientist. So,
should get Joe Nickel on there and see if you can talk with him about it.
Absolutely.
Everyone's favorite skeptic. I know Daniel loves him.
James White of atheism.
the English.
Well, we've dealt with the guys on Skeptics and Seekers, so we could probably deal with about any of the skeptics that are in the professional field of being skeptics. Right?
Seriously, thank you all for letting me know. I really appreciate the work that both of you, that all three of you have done. So it's great conversing with Dale. Nice to meet you, David, finally, and well, Caleb, I'll just see you in the group chats later tonight, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you for joining, though. Unlike some people in our group chat who were watching and didn't bother to join, so I won't name names. But
he took off.
Oh, he did. Yeah.
Like, oh no.
Oh no, he's still here.
Okay.
If you want to close out the show, David, we can stay and talk about some stuff for a little bit. I don't know if you're done, but if you want to, I know we're still live right now, but however you want
All
to.
right. Well, no, yeah, we're gonna end the broadcast. We can chill out and talk a little bit, but yeah, guys. Again, thanks for coming on. Again, let me remind everybody that there's a contest going on. We are going to get a new logo and maybe a new name, but first a logo. Yeah. So there's a prize involved. We're gonna send you something. We got some cool stuff going on in the works, or in my studio, should I say? But yeah, so we'll be sending out prizes for that in July. But yeah, if you have an idea and if you're artistic, shoot me an email with the attached logo that you think we should have. And yeah, if you like the show, subscribe. Again, welcome Caleb to the show. Appreciate you taking the mantle for David. Sorry that he didn't want to join us. He wanted to eat and feed his gut before he would actually hang out with us. But
Okay.
we got Dale Glover that came on instead, and he's a lot better than Paulman anyway. So yeah.
Sure.
Poor Paulman. No wonder.
Yeah, well, he denies the virgin birth, so I think.
Oh, he's a heretic.
Yes,
And
but anyway.
he's a Calvinist, right? So
He's
Right,
a presuppositionalist too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of the bad.
But anyways,
his teeth right now.
well, everybody, this is PRA. We got a lot more content coming up for you guys in the near future. So yeah, have a good night.